5 years ago, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, the outcome of which is always death. My husband and I were devastated. Top lymphoma specialists from USC, UCLA, Stanford, and the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute all confirmed that with existing therapies, this disease was incurable. One ray of hope emerged at Dana-Farber, an experimental procedure, an autologous bone marrow transplant, preceded by extremely high-dose radiation and massive chemotherapy. I would receive as much radiation as people who were 1 mile from ground zero at Hiroshima. This approach to treating low-grade lymphomas involves extreme risk to the patient, yet was offered as my only hope for a long-term remission. I would lose my hair and experience severe nausea and vomiting. I would spend 6 weeks in isolation. The chemotherapy would damage my heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, and bladder, and radiation would damage my eyes, salivary glands, thyroid, and reproductive organs. If I did live 10 years, I might develop leukemia. With 3 teenagers at home who needed me, there had to be a better way. So my husband and I searched. We discovered Dr. Stanislaw Burzynski, who was successfully treating advanced cancer patients with a gentle, non-toxic therapy. I started Dr. Burzynski's Antineoplaston in November '92. At that time, I had lymphoma throughout my body, in my bone marrow, and a fast-growing tumor half the size of an orange protruding from my neck. After only 3 weeks of treatment, this tumor disappeared. Subsequent CAT scans taken every 3 months at UCLA showed my other tumors shrinking too. Most important was the quality of my life during this treatment. I was able to lead a completely normal life. I was a regular busy mom, driving my carpools and doing my grocery shopping. Faced with having to choose between a bone marrow transplant and a gentle, effective treatment with virtually no side effects, which would you choose for yourself or your loved ones? 1 year after starting Dr. Burzynski's treatment, UCLA pronounced me in remission. I remained in remission until this past October, at which time a CAT scan revealed the disturbing presence of 2 enlarged lymph nodes in my neck. Immediately, Dr. Burzynski put me back on the Antineoplaston capsules. I know I will respond as readily as I did the first time. What I don't know is whether I will have access to Dr. Burzynski's life-saving therapy if the FDA succeeds in preventing him from treating patients. Dr. Burzynski saved my life, and for that, he is facing 300 years in a federal penitentiary. This is an outrage. I am scared for my life and the lives of all of Dr. Burzynski's patients who the FDA will cut off from their doctor and their medicine. As if having to battle cancer is not enough, the fear, anxiety, and anger generated by the recent FDA retaliation against Dr. Burzynski is overwhelming. We come before you today to implore you to please put a stop to the relentless persecution of Dr. Burzynski. Thank you very much.
My wife's story is not unique. We've seen dozens of them, and many are more compelling than our own, as you've seen today. But the real issue here is the right to choose the doctor and the therapy that we decide is best for us. It's ironic that when it comes to discussing choice, it's always a woman's right to have an abortion. That's fine. But what about cancer patients who choose life by pursuing the treatment that they wish? Perhaps Dr. Burzynski has found the medical breakthrough of the century. Certainly a wealth of empirical data hints at that possibility, but how will we ever know if the FDA succeeds in quashing it? In the case of HIV, the FDA has streamlined the approval process for new drugs. Recently, an HIV drug was approved in a record 96 days. Well, why can't we, Dr. Burzynski's patients and families of patients, get the same consideration? After years of providing the FDA with copious evidence as to the safety and effectiveness of antineoplastons, the FDA still requires further proof. That proof is here before you today, not only on this panel, but in the audience, in the form of living, walking, breathing cancer patients. As many of their doctors have confirmed, they would have died long ago if it were not for Dr. Burzynski. We've been wronged by our government. We need your help to make common sense prevail at FDA. Dr. Burzynski has been treating cancer patients for the past 19 years, more than 2,500 patients in all, and not one has filed a complaint. Yet the FDA has convened 4 grand juries, none of which returned an indictment. Finally, 5 days after this body pressed David Kessler for answers on retaliatory actions against Dr. Burzynski, guess what? He was indicted. The charges all stem from the heinous crime, this terribly heinous crime, of treating not only Texas residents at his Houston clinic, but patients from our state as well. Since we live in California, my wife would have had to die, or we would have had to move to Texas to satisfy the FDA's strange logic. Why should we have to jump through hoops to have the right to treat my wife's cancer the way we choose? In the past 25 years, in the war against cancer, $29 billion in taxpayer money has been spent, billions, untold billions in private sector funds have been spent, and the result, more people are dying of cancer than ever before.
Summarize in one sentence.
Okay, I get it. When you see how the FDA treats a true medical innovator like Dr. Burzynski, it's easy to understand why. The first thing I would ask is that we implore the FDA to level the playing field. A system has been established. There's no conspiracy. I don't think it was done out of any evil intent. It's just evolved over the last maybe 15 years, where according to the GAO's own estimates, it costs in excess of $425 million to bring a new drug to market. And by anybody's best estimates, the average is somewhere around 12 to 15 years. So what we're relegated to is a system that we're fighting this disease, today's diseases, with technology that came about in the 1950s and the 1960s and the 70s. Imagine if this committee, the Commerce Committee, the broader committee, put the computer industry under those same restraints, where we would be. So there's got to be a way to level the playing field that does not favor the Mercks and the Bristol Myers and the large drug companies. They can do what they normally do, that's fine. But there should be a system developed where we can encourage innovative research that's being done by the sole practitioner, the sole researcher. But it'll all be moot if the pending criminal prosecution is allowed to go forth. So they can establish the INDs, allow the patients to get their medication now, but these bogus charges that he's being brought up on will make the whole thing moot if this innovative
Steve
pioneer
Siegel
is allowed to be imprisoned as a result
I'm
of
Steve
what
Siegel.
the FDA is trying to do.
The fortunate distinction of being the husband of Mary Jo Siegel, my wife, who's going to tell you her story in a few minutes. But just want to give you an idea of the frustration, the anger, and the anguish. 5 years ago, Mary Jo was diagnosed with a terminal form of cancer, Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. To make a very long story short, we were offered things that were very experimental, like radiation therapy in conjunction with the bone marrow. We researched for a number of months and found Dr. Burzynski, MD, PhD, researcher of first-class nature. He took Mary Jo into his care, and again, to make a long story short, within 1 year, she was pronounced in remission. Virtually no side effects to the treatment. Now, the FDA has come down on Dr. Burzynski. It's almost as if they had dumped a load of rattlesnakes on his head. He is facing now 225 years in prison, has nothing to do with whether the medicine works, has nothing to do with whether it's safe and effective, because they have admitted both that it is safe and effective, and yet he's facing 225 years in a federal prison. By contrast, murderers, on the average, spend 12 years in jail. What's his crime is he treated my wife and 280 patients, current 2,500 patients total, who happen to have the misfortune of living in other states. If he's violating the law, which will be determined in a criminal trial in October, then the laws need to be changed. We need help. We need support. We are looking at what possibly might be the cancer breakthrough or even the medical breakthrough of the century. Ultimately, isn't the final choice ours? In this country, you have a right to choose abortion. You have the right to choose now assisted suicide. You have the right to refuse medical treatment. Let's take it a step further. We're one step away. You should have the right to save your life, the right to choose the medical treatment of your choice.
I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a fatal cancer. Conventional medicine offered me only a nightmare, one which would ultimately lead to my death. After extensive research, we discovered Dr. Burzynski, and I started his gentle, non-toxic treatment, and within 1 year, I was pronounced in remission. I suffered no side effects on this treatment and was able to raise my family and enjoy my life. In October, I had a CAT scan which revealed a slight occurrence of the disease. I am now back on the medication, and if the FDA has its way, I will be cut off from my life-saving treatment. Dr. Kessler, I don't want to die.